Hello everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Journey Through Norse Mythology. Today we will take a look at a rather interesting topic, and one of my personally favorites. Let's talk about cosmology in the universe of Norse mythology. Before we start, it is important to say that unlike us, the people following the Germanic religions in the Viking Age didn't have such an orderly idea of the universe as we do. First, forget the slick and uniform image of the universe in Norse mythology you have right now, because it is most likely inaccurate. The Old Norsemen didn't have such a rational and fixed view of their universe as we have today. The craving to have a perfect, orderly picture of the universe composed from all the mythological lore we have on hand is a desire of a modern man, but not a person that followed the ancient religion at the time. To better understand the true nature of the world of Norse mythology, we have to see it as the Old Norsemen did. Imagine the world of Norse mythology as two planes of existence. One is our world, the real world. The second is the other world, in the most literal sense. The other world was the plane of existence where all the mythological creatures, deities and monsters dwelled. It was a place remote from the world of us mortals, but nevertheless not unreachable. The lines between our world and the other world were blurry rather than fixed, hard to pass but not impassable. One could cross into the other world through feats of immense endeavor and determination. That's why they were mostly done by mythical heroes and wise, witty characters, rather than mere simple folk. Such ways of entering the other world included things like sailing to the far ends of the ocean to reach Noatun, the grand home of Njord, the sea god, or perhaps venturing deep into the dark and seemingly bottomless caves to enter the cavernous home of the dwarves, or maybe crossing the enormous range of mountains that towered over the horizon to arrive into Jotunheim, where giants dwelled. These deeds, as we can see, could be easily achieved today and thus disprove the existence of the other world. However, what we have to realize is that the Old Norsemen didn't have all the advantages in knowledge and technology we have today, and so for them, these deeds may have seemed almost impossible. No one was there to disprove their beliefs, so when the Old Norsemen looked at the tall mountains that loomed over the horizon, they could have very well imagined it to be the border between their world and the realm of the giants. The Old Norsemen lived with the belief they were a part of a much grander universe that was as much a part of their world as they were a part of it. Their world and the other world were but two aspects of reality they resided in, and they believed these two aspects to be intertwined far more than we might think. For was it not Thor beating his hammer when lightning flashed in the distance and thunder rumbled through the valleys? And was it not Odin that helped the Norsemen triumph in battle? These and many other aspects of their day-to-day lives, the Norsemen thought of as an influence of the creatures and deities that lived in the other world. But what is the other world? Well, as much as we today would like to think of it as something utterly unimaginable, the picture the Old Norsemen had in their mind when they thought of the other world was actually much more familiar than you might think. To picture the other world, we can simply step up the image we have of our own world, for the other world is greater in every way. The trees are taller and their leaves much lusher. The grass is soft as silk and brighter than you would believe. The rivers are wider and water in them clearer and tastier. The mountains in Jotunheim are much bigger than those in our world, and the rocks there are much sharper and more massive, and the wind is much colder. The homes of the gods are much grander and more beautiful than any other in our world, and the gods themselves are far richer, mightier and wiser than any among us mere mortals. These and many more examples of grandeur could be made about the other world. Now that we have a basic idea of what the relationship between our world and the other world was, let's talk about the force that keeps the cosmos together. The world tree, Yggdrasil. Meaning literally Ygg's horse, the translation may seem a bit confusing at first, but let me explain. Ygg or in translation, the Terrible One, is but one of the many names for Odin, and Odin regularly used Yggdrasil's branches to travel between the worlds, seeking ever more knowledge and wisdom. Now that we know how the World Tree got its name, let's see what else we know about it. This mighty ash tree is the pillar of balance in the universe, uniting all of creation. The tree, however, was thought of more as a symbol or an idea, the essence of the cosmic balance, and not as a physical tree out there in the universe. Now let's examine Yggdrasil some more by reading a passage from an Old Norse poem. Quote, "Three routes there are that three ways run. Neath the ash tree Yggdrasil. Neath the first lives hell, neath the second the frost giants, neath the third are the lands of men." End quote. So from this passage we can clearly say that there are three roots of Yggdrasil anchored in the universe. One root is grounded deep in the cold and dark caverns of Helheim, or simply Hell, the world of the dead. Don't let the name fool you, however. This realm was nothing like the Christian concept of the underworld, where the sinners are punished for their wrongdoings for all of eternity. The ancient Germanic people didn't look upon the deeds they have done in their day-to-day lives as morally good or bad, nor did they believe in any sort of punishment in the afterlife. Now, what is the difference between Hell and Valhalla, if there even is any, is a subject we'll discuss at another time. For now, let's return to the spring in Hell, from which the mighty root of Yggdrasil drinks water for nourishment. Hvergelmir is called the river in which one of Yggdrasil's roots quenches its thirst, and according to one Old Norse poem, this might be the primal spring from which all the rivers in the universe originate. However, that is about all we know about Hvergelmir, as no other source referring to this possibly primal river has been uncovered to this day, so any information on what mystical properties this spring might have had are unfortunately lost to us. Now going back to Yggdrasil, its second root runs deep into Jotunheim, in the Well of Wisdom, the spring that holds the ancient knowledge of the universe and secrets of both life and death. The keeper of the well, wise Mimir, won't let anyone drink from his spring without paying a price. But what that price is, and who exactly is this keeper of wisdom, is a subject we'll discuss in another video. About the third root of Yggdrasil, we however know nothing noteworthy at all, with the acceptance of it being rooted in the lands of men, those of course being Midgard. Perhaps the root in Midgard had its own well, perhaps not. There is no telling today of what interesting things might have been told about it in days long gone. Now let's see what else we know about Yggdrasil by looking into yet another Old Norse poem. Quote, "There stands an ash called Yggdrasil, a mighty tree showered in white hail. From there come the dews that fall in the valleys. It stands evergreen above Urd's well. From there come maidens, very wise, free from the lake that stands beneath the pole. One is called Urd, another Verdandi, Skald the third. They carve into the tree the lives and destinies of children." End quote. Two important things to take away from this poem are the Well of Urd and the three maidens. The Well of Urd, in translation, means the Well of Destiny, and around it live the three maidens mentioned. These three maidens, called Urd, Verdandi and Skald, are no other than the three great Norns, the weavers of destiny. The concept of fate in Norse mythology and in the culture of the old Germanic peoples in return was a force that could not be rivaled with. Even though the curse of one's destiny is fickle and vague, no man, beast nor god can escape the final destination that is set for them. Don't be mistaken, however, the Norns aren't in charge of anyone's destiny. They merely transcribed everyone's destiny, over which they however hold no influence. It is said that the runes, magical alphabet of untold might and power, is engraved on their fingernails. And the Norns use these runes to carve the destinies of all into the trunk of Yggdrasil itself, and so the power of the runes in turn flows throughout the 9 realms that the World Tree holds in its branches and roots. Thus are set the fates of all things living. We will talk about the runes and what they mean at another time, but for now we can say that these magical signs hold power and knowledge beyond imagining. So great is the might of the runes that even the king of the gods, Odin himself, strived to learn their power. Yet another story we'll tackle some other time. And where exactly reside the Norns and the Well of Urd? Well, in a passage from the Old Norse poem we read, it is simply stated that the Well of Urd is the place from above which the world tree grows, so that would logically place it at the base of Yggdrasil's trunk, where all roots converge. Last few things we know about the mysterious Norns is that they use the sparkling waters and mud from the Well of Urd to nourish the roots of Yggdrasil, thus preventing it from drying out and rotting. How can such a cosmic tree rot, you ask? Well, just as with any other tree, it is a host to many animals and creatures that live all along its body. Around its root in Helheim swell too many snakes or maybe even dragons to count, smothering the root with their bodies. One larger and more malicious than the others, called Nidhogg, gnaws at the root in an attempt to fell down the mighty tree and plunge the universe into destruction. Up in the highest branches of Yggdrasil sits a nameless eagle, and along the trunk of the tree runs a squirrel named Ratatosk, who carries messages between Nidhogg and the eagle, presumably consisting of curses and malicious remarks. And lastly, 4 deers named Dvalin, Dane, Duneir and Dyrithor nibble at the branches of Yggdrasil. However, there are no real sources or ideas as to the nature of these 4 deer, and as it stands right now, they serve no real purpose in the myths. Well, now that we have talked about Yggdrasil, let's talk about the worlds it holds in its branches. It is a common misconception today to imagine the worlds of Norse mythology as some individual planets far away in space. As we said in the beginning, these realms were but a part of a larger plane of existence called the Otherworld, and the veil between them was merely blurry to say the least. However, let's now delve into the topic of the mythical Norse realms by first reading a passage from yet another Norse poem. In this poem, a female seer named Volva recites the ancient truths and law of the cosmos to Odin, and presumably an assembly of other humans who gathered there to listen. Quote, "I remember yet the giants of yore, who gave me bread in days gone by. 9 worlds I knew, the 9 in the tree, with mighty roots beneath the mold." End quote. In this passage we can clearly see Volva remembering back to distinctly 9 worlds in the days long gone. Now the trouble with this is that there is never given a list of which exactly these worlds are. Not a name of one world is ever mentioned as being in a relation with the 9. Now I bet many of you can easily name all the 9 worlds of Norse mythology you believe there are off the top of your head. However, there is no source that can confirm your claims. From the sources we have right now, we can put together a list that is the most probable account of all the 9 realms. Nevertheless, we cannot say with 100% certainty that we are correct. Perhaps there were other worlds in Norse mythology that are nowadays lost to us, but as it is right now, this is the best guess we have as to what worlds comprise the 9. Midgard. We have already mentioned the creation of this realm and how humans came to inhabit it. Midgard is the only realm that is located in our world, the real world, while all the rest of the realms converge around it and are in the other world. Vanaheim. Vanaheim was the realm of the second group of gods, called Vanir. These were primordially gods of fertility. We can think of them as being the group of gods associated with nature, and the Aesir, those being Odin and his children, being the group of gods associated with power, society, and civilization. How exactly does Vanaheim look like is never described in the sources, but given that we know the Vanir as being primarily gods of fertility and nature, I'm sure you can let your imagination run wild with how their home looked. Alfheim. Alfheim was the place where the elves dwelled, though they didn't look like what you might think. The elves in Norse mythology were luminous beings, mostly described as spirits of nature. They could be kind, mischievous, even downright spiteful and vengeful, depending on the circumstances they were encountered in. The elves were powerful in their own right, even being considered on the level of demigods, and making sacrifices to them or worshipping them was not uncommon. Furthermore, the gods and the elves held quite a friendship, even perhaps spiritual kinship towards each other, as the elves are mentioned many times to be present at feasts that the gods held, and the Vanir god Frey is even the lord of Alfheim itself. There are no sources to tell us what Alfheim looked like, so once more we have to let our imagination run wild. Nidavellir. Nidavellir, the cavernous home of the dwarves, located in deep underground caves illuminated only by the bright light of their forge fires. The dwarves hold quite an important role in Norse mythology. We have already mentioned that the dwarves Ostri, Vestri, Nordri and Sudri hold up the skies over Midgard, but this is just a sliver of the deeds that these beings are mentioned for in the many poems of the old Germanic peoples. They are also renowned for being expert craftsmen, as well as being magically powerful and also wise and knowledgeable. The dwarves were the ones who forged Thor's hammer and Odin's spear, just to name some of their contributions, but there will be more to come, I assure you, be it deeds of good or ill. There is no mention in any source that would back our today's vision of dwarves as beings of small stature with long bushy beards. The only few attributes that we know of them are that their skin was as black as coal and that they dwelled underground, for being exposed to sunlight would turn them to stone. Even the lines between dwarves and elves in Norse mythology are blurry and uncertain at best, and we know too little about each to make any decisive comparison. There is, however, the difference between the roles of these beings in both Norse mythology and the real world of the old Germanic peoples. While the elves were often worshipped and included in religious rituals and practices, but were almost unmentioned in the actual myths themselves, the dwarves were the exact opposite, as they hold a substantial role in the myths, yet there is no evidence that they were ever worshipped. Jotunheim. The homeland of the giants, a mountainous and inhospitable region for anyone but the toughest of creatures. While this land is cut off from the rest of the world by tall ranges of icy mountains, and filled with deep forests and mountains both covered in snow, you might be surprised to know that gods often venture there. Be it Thor in an angry fit, looking to blow off some steam on the local inhabitants, or Odin riding to the Well of Wisdom to converse with its keeper Mimir about the untold astral secrets. Niflheim and Muspelheim. We have already talked about these two realms of elemental ice and fire in our first video, and I suggest you check that out if you seek to know more about the deeper nature of these two realms, as there is not much more I could tell you about them. With that, let's move on to the next realm. Helheim. Helheim, or simply Hel, is the land of the dead under the sovereign rule of the grim goddess Hel herself. You may have heard of Helheim being synonymous with Niflheim, and that's because Hel made her home in the realm of ice when she was casted out there. Why that was is a story for another time, but for now all you need to know is that Helheim lies within Niflheim. Hel wasn't a place where dead came to suffer, however. If you were to describe it in any way, the underworld of Hel was a perfect personification of the serenity of death. Death, in both Norse mythology and in the mind of old Germanic peoples, wasn't an end, but only transition to yet another state of being. It is more than apparent in the myths, where the dead are often awoken from their slumber to reveal some deep secrets, or when the dead communicate with their kin from beyond the grave. the only real hardship we know the dead went through is the construction of a ship called Naglfar. This vessel is entirely constructed out of the nails of the dead, and in this ship will Loki sail with the armies of the dead in the final assault against the gods at Ragnarok. Yet there is still one realm missing, isn't there? Yes, only the home of the Aesir gods remains to complete the 9. But there is so much to say about this realm that it deserves its own video. So this would be all for today, and I bid you all farewell. Until next time.